Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi here with 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor. We're going to discuss the Trump Organization, which was found guilty on 17 criminal charges, including tax fraud and manipulating property valuations as well. And for more on this, what it might mean in the long run for both the Trump Organization as well as perhaps the former president himself, we're now joined by, again, Whitney Traylor for a bit more on this. Yeah. Whitney, could you start by just giving us a bit of background about this case and what it means ultimately as well?
Yeah, this is one case of many actually against former President Trump and the Trump Organization. This one was actually directed at the Trump Organization, so it was the Trump Corporation and the Trump Payroll Corporation that were essentially the defendants. And the issue was related to valuations of their real estate holdings and what they represented. But the bigger charges were related to tax fraud, and that was essentially they would be doing things like paying their executives by paying their car note or leasing them a car, and they were not reporting that. Alan Weisselberg, who was testified for the prosecution, he was an important witness, the CFO for the Trump Organization for years and years. He testified, for example, that his Mercedes was paid for through the Trump Organization. He didn't report that, which is income. He also reported that the grandchildren's tuition for their school, private school, was being paid for by the organization. So in other words, they were compensating these executives but not reporting the compensation, so they were getting around some of the tax laws, really.
How serious are these charges?
Well, the charges are serious, and not only are the charges serious, but what happened in the process, they took depositions, they got other information, and you have to remember there's 4 or 5 different civil and criminal cases going on across the country dealing with the Trump Organization. So when people testify under oath, when they give deposition testimony, that's stuff that can be used in all these other cases. And so what happens is as you get more information coming out, they just got the tax returns. There was a bunch of information that was the Trump Organization was sort of fighting back on producing, but they ultimately produced that. That now becomes relevant in some of these other cases as well.
Off the top of my head, and maybe just to translate this a little bit for our audience out there, off the top of my head, the way this thinks to me, or this sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, this sounds almost mafia-like. Am I right about this, where this sounds like kind of skirting tax rules, putting money in different places, paying people with weird, atypical means? Is that a fair analogy or not?
I think that is a fair analogy because the organization, it was all these manipulative moves, and that's ultimately how they got the mafia on tax evasion and things like that. So that is very relevant. What else is relevant, and this is sort of a common malfeasance in business, is where a company will represent its finances to the bank one way and say, hey, we're good, we don't have a lot of debt. But then when they file their tax returns, they show a different picture and say, yeah, we're in debt. And so the presentation to the bank looks much better and different than what they file with the IRS. And that's another issue that you're seeing a lot of evidence around that. Alan Weisselberg was the CFO. He obviously, he knows where the bodies are buried, if you will. He knows where all the fraud occurred. So him being a witness for the prosecution is really significant. I mean, just think about it. Any company who their CFO, one of their top executives for 15, 20 years, is now working with the prosecution. I mean, he knows everything. I mean, he knows a lot about the business. So that's really key. But we're going to see, we have the Georgia case. We have another civil case in New York. There's the January 6th stuff. So there is a slew of litigation that all of it is relevant together, and it's all separate.
And you're regarding the former president there. And speaking of the former president, he is not directly charged in this, but my understanding is he remains under investigation. Is that correct? And what does this mean directly for him?
Well, that's a great point because his name came up a lot, and at times the defense objected to how the prosecution was using, implying that President Trump knew certain things. So it's important to point out, this was a case against only the entities. This was not individuals. And actually the Trump Organization came out and said, hey, there were some individuals who engaged in, bad conduct, and they should be liable, not the organization. But it's a common legal principle. Corporate entities are just like people when it comes to litigation. They can sue. The corporation in its own name can sue. It can be sued, and that's exactly what happened. And the issue then is, well, what's the penalty? So there, as I understand it, the maximum penalty in this situation is 1.6 million, which to the Trump organization is nothing. But again, where I think this is more dangerous is the various testimony, and including the two of the Trump children and other people who have been deposed, which we don't even know what happened in some of those depositions. We just know what happened at this trial, and the jury came back with these guilty verdicts.
Maybe, again, maybe thinking outside the box a little bit here, is that I think this is far from the first time that there's been this kind of legal trouble involving the Trump organization or Trump, the former president himself. He has, I would say, maybe an acquired skill in kind of navigating through these waters. Do you see an out for him in this case as well?
It's a great point. I mean, he's deflected a lot, and it's unfortunate because a lot of people are saying, oh, this is a political witch hunt, and that's part of his narrative.
Right.
Here, this is not a subjective situation, so all the folks who say this is a political witch hunt, the documents are there, the evidence will be there, and these are going to be, these are Democrat and Republican judges making these rulings. So I would tell everybody who has concerns, have faith in the judiciary. As these cases go forward, they're the objective body that is adjudicating these cases, and these are Trump appointees in some cases, and some are Clinton appointees. So, the point is that it's going to be decided by a judge in an objective way. And so, how long will it take? Well, that's an issue. They have promised to appeal this. I have looked at the documents. I don't see strong grounds for appeal, but that doesn't matter. You can still appeal it, and that can last a year, 2, 3 years, depending on the levels of appeal. So, yes, the president, President Trump, is good at delaying these things, but ultimately, when you're dealing with these lawsuits and these criminal prosecutions, there will come resolution to it. Now, what's interesting about it is if in any of these instances President Trump individually is found to be criminally liable, how that will work. I mean, some of these issues we've just never dealt with before. The closest I would say is probably President Nixon in terms of getting into some trouble, who was pardoned. And so this will play out for years and years until we have some case law and some precedent.
All right, so I guess we'll figure that out. And you said that the timeline should be in the next few weeks, next few months, when we'll find out what the convictions lead to in terms of punishment.
Yes, well, so here they have vowed to appeal, and I believe they have to appeal within 45 days. So if they appeal, I think everything will probably be stayed and until the appeal is resolved. So the next step would be to see if they file the appeal. If not, then yes, then the sentencing, if you will, the punishment, which, like I said, I believe the maximum penalty is 1.6 in terms of punitive damage.
So the guilty verdicts came back first week of December. To your point, and maybe to try and stall things out, did they wait till day 44 of the 45-day period to?
Maybe, but the matter of days to whether you appeal on day 44 or day 1 isn't significant, because the appeal process, just getting to the next level of appeal, will take at least a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll find out in due time. But 90s legal expert Whitney Traylor, we appreciate your time and answering some of our burning questions about this.
Sure thing. Good to be here.